Have you ever felt targeted, judged not by your actions, but by the color of your skin? Meet David, a successful black entrepreneur who found himself repeatedly pulled over just for driving in the wrong neighborhood. Driving with Dignity is a story about courage, justice, and one man's fight against racial profiling. What happens next will show you the true power of resilience. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. And if this story of bravery and honesty resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. David stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He straightened his tie, a nervous habit he hadn't quite kicked. Today was a big day. A potential investor was flying in to discuss expanding his tech startup. David's company, Innovate Solutions, was his dream made real. He'd built it from the ground up, pouring in blood, sweat, and countless sleepless nights. David was proud. He pulled away from his modern downtown office, the sun glinting off the sleek buildings around him. He adjusted the GPS, inputting the address of a high-end restaurant in the upscale suburb of Oakwood, a place known for its manicured lawns and multi-million-dollar homes. It was the perfect setting to impress a potential investor. The drive started smoothly. David enjoyed the scenery as he drove his luxury car. The roads became wider, the trees taller, and the atmosphere noticeably quieter. He was almost there. Then, the flashing red and blue lights appeared in his rearview mirror. David sighed inwardly. Not again, he thought. His hands tightened around the steering wheel as he prepared for another unjust stop. He signaled, carefully pulled over to the side of the road, and turned off the engine. A stern-faced police officer approached his car, his posture rigid, his gaze unwavering. "Officer, license and registration, please." David calmly provided the documents. He knew the drill all too well. His heart pounded as he remembered the previous encounters, each filled with humiliation. "Officer, do you know why I pulled you over, sir?" David: "No, officer. I believe I was driving within the speed limit." "Officer, your taillight is out, sir." David knew that wasn't true. He had just had the car serviced. He suppressed a surge of anger. David: "Officer, I just had the car inspected last week. Are you sure?" The officer ignored his comment, taking the documents back to his patrol car. David waited, his heart pounding. This wasn't the first time this had happened. In fact, it was the 5th time in the last 6 months that he had been pulled over while driving through Oakwood. Every time it was some minor, often fabricated infraction. David wasn't naive. He knew what was happening. He was being racially profiled. Driving while black was a painful reality. He was a successful entrepreneur, a contributing member of society, but in the eyes of some, he was just a black man in a nice car in the wrong neighborhood. He felt a familiar mix of rage and helplessness wash over him. The officer returned, holding a ticket. His eyes remained cold and indifferent. "Officer, here's your citation, sir. Get that taillight fixed. Have a good day." David: "Officer, with all due respect, this is the 5th time I've been pulled over in this town in the last 6 months. Every time it's been a minor infraction. I believe I'm being targeted because of my race." Officer: "Sir, I'm just doing my job. Have a good day." The officer walked away, leaving David seething with frustration. He looked at his watch. He was already late for the meeting. He knew this incident had already damaged his chances. He reluctantly drove on, his mind racing. The meeting went poorly. The investor was clearly distracted, and the earlier incidents had destroyed David's confidence. The deal fell through. As he walked out of the restaurant, David felt a wave of despair wash over him. That night, David couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, replaying the traffic stops in his head. He was tired of being targeted. He was tired of the anxiety, the humiliation, and the constant fear of being pulled over. He decided he wasn't going to take it anymore. He vowed to fight back. The next day, David reached out to an old college friend, Sarah, who was now a civil rights lawyer. He told her everything, his voice trembling with emotion. "Sarah, David, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. This is textbook racial profiling. We can fight this." Her voice was filled with determination. "David, what can I do? It's just my word against theirs." He was desperate for a solution. "Sarah, we need evidence. Start documenting every traffic stop. Use your phone to record everything. Note the officer's name, badge number, and the reason for the stop. Also, keep all the citations and any dashcam footage if you have it." Her advice was clear and direct. David followed Sarah's advice. The next time he was pulled over, he was ready. He calmly and respectfully recorded the entire interaction. "Officer, license and registration, please." His voice was stern, unwavering. David, calmly. "Officer, I am recording this interaction. Is that okay with you?" His hand trembled slightly as he held up his phone. The officer seemed slightly taken aback but continued with the stop. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Officer, your registration is expired, sir." David. "Officer, I renewed my registration online last week. I have the confirmation email right here." He held his phone out for the officer to see. The officer, realizing he couldn't fabricate a reason this time, simply handed back the documents. "Officer, have a good day, sir." His tone was curt, but this time David wasn't going to let him off the hook. He took a deep breath, steeling his resolve. "David, officer, I know this is racial profiling. I am tired of being targeted." His voice was firm, resolute. "Officer, sir, I told you, I'm just doing my job." He looked away, avoiding eye contact. "David, I'm going to file a complaint. This has to stop." He stood his ground, refusing to be intimidated. David filed a formal complaint with the police department, attaching all the evidence he had collected, the citations, the recordings, and a detailed timeline of the incidents. He also consulted with Sarah again. "Sarah, David, this is excellent. We have a solid case." Her eyes gleamed with optimism. "I think it's time we consider filing a lawsuit." David. And Sarah decided to sue the police department for discriminatory policing practices. It was a bold move, but David was determined to fight for justice. He felt a mix of fear and determination as he prepared for the battle ahead. The lawsuit gained media attention. Local news outlets and even some national publications picked up the story. David became the face of the "driving while black" issue. News reporter David Miller, a local entrepreneur, is suing the Oakwood Police Department alleging racial profiling. Her voice was serious, conveying the gravity of the situation. "David, I am doing this not just for myself, but for all black men who face this kind of discrimination." He spoke with passion, his voice filled with conviction. The police department initially denied any wrongdoing. Police spokesperson: "The Oakwood Police Department is committed to fair and impartial policing. We deny any allegations of racial profiling." His expression was stern, unyielding. But as the evidence mounted, David's recordings, expert testimony, and statistical data showing the disproportionate number of black drivers pulled over in Oakwood, the pressure on the police department intensified. Cracks began to appear in their defense. The turning point came when a former police officer, who had left the department due to his own moral objections to the racist practices, came forward to corroborate David's claims. Former officer: "I witnessed firsthand how officers were encouraged to target black drivers in affluent neighborhoods. It was a deliberate strategy." His voice was filled with remorse and disgust. Faced with overwhelming evidence and mounting public pressure, the police department finally agreed to settle the lawsuit. They knew they couldn't win. The settlement included a public apology from the police chief, mandatory racial sensitivity training for all officers, and the implementation of body cameras to increase accountability. Police Chief. On behalf of the Oakwood Police Department, I want to apologize to Mr. Miller and to the entire Black community for the discriminatory practices that have occurred. We are committed to making changes to ensure that all citizens are treated with respect and dignity. His apology seemed genuine, though long overdue. David Miller's case brought the issue of driving while Black to the forefront. It sparked a broader conversation about systemic racism and police reform. Other police departments across the country began reviewing their policies and implementing similar reforms. David wasn't just an entrepreneur anymore. He had become an advocate for change. He used his newfound platform to speak out against racial injustice and to inspire others to stand up for their rights. David's tech startup Innovate Solutions thrived, and he used his success to fund scholarships for underprivileged students and support civil rights organizations. He found purpose beyond his own success, dedicating his life to fighting for equality. Years later, driving through Oakwood, David no longer felt the same fear and anxiety. He saw police officers wearing body cameras, interacting with all citizens with respect and professionalism. While the fight against racism was far from over, David knew that he had made a difference. He had contributed to a more just world. He had turned a personal struggle into a victory for justice. Driving with dignity. That was the legacy he would leave behind. David's story shows us that even in the face of persistent injustice, courage and determination can lead to real change. It reminds us that standing up for what's right, documenting the truth, and fighting for accountability can make a difference in our communities. So, what did you think of David's fight for dignity? Let us know in the comments below. And if you were inspired by this story of perseverance and justice, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that empower and uplift. Thanks for watching.